folks, I'm excited about tonight's Word on the Street with none other than Mike Sluder, incredible prophetic guy, prophetic singer, prayer warrior, you name it. Amarola loves him, and now you're going to love him too. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well tonight.
Wonderful. Hey, brother, you look well. And again, man, I met you a few years ago and around the ITVN circles when Christy and I first moved to Amarillo. And man, come full circle. You know, we were about to bring Larry Lee and Ron Till to town with Todd Pitts. And I thought, man, I just keep thinking about this Mike Sluder dude. And I really liked you and loved what you stood for, and got to have lunch with you for the first time and got to know you better. And it was no mystery to me, Mike. It's because God has given you incredible things to do. You have been serving faithfully in the prophetic community in circles and prayer circles for years, you know, and including some of the circles with Rick Joyner and other popular ministry branches and offshoots and stuff. You've even been a pastor before. Guys, pastors watching, hey, Mike's been there. I've been there too. But this whole new thing, but in our conversation, and by the way, the weekend with Ron Till and Larry Lee was amazing. If you were there, you would have heard Mike Sluder and this crazy guy here who loves your voice. Hey, man, would you sing? Man, both times you sang right there from where you were. Next time you got to be on the microphone with a voice like that. But you and your wonderful wife were there Sunday, and it was great. But what's even more exciting to me is what takes place on a regular basis in Amarillo. You mentioned it. You call it the Quorum. Now tell us what that is.
Quorum is a part of Kathy and Bill Johnson Ministries. They have taken this prophetic movement and they're nurturing it. And what they do is they have came out from underneath. They were elders at a big church here in Amarillo, and they just felt like God had called them out to start this community. And this community, we're raising up prophets, we're raising up intercessors, we're trying, and it's through the whole, it's offered through the Panhandle, region, and I had to leave Amarillo to go train myself. Janice and I, we just uprooted and went to North Carolina, and then we went up to a church in Ohio. So we were at Morning Star for a little bit. Then we went up to a church in Ohio for a year and helped, just serve there. And then we went to Colorado Springs. And when we got there, I went to work for Peter and Doris Wagner and Chuck Pierce.
Wow.
So I had, I just served. I didn't have any big responsibilities. We helped with the conferences. And my thing is that I got to know all the world intercessors.
Wow.
Have an international conference of intercession, and I just served them. And, I kind of thought, man, I'd like to get to know, but just serving and watching is how I learned to get into major intercession. Well, that's kind of a little bit of my background. We moved back to Texas and we live here now in Canyon, south of Amarillo, but the Quorum is basically a strategic prayer army.
Wow.
Where don't just do, it's not one of these for beginners. And we don't just, unless God just gives us wisdom that, hey, I need you to minister to one another. It's about focusing out and understanding what he wants us to legislate in the heavenlies. And so, and that's what a quorum is a group of people coming into unity and legislating law. Yeah, it is very strategic. And in the last quorum that we have, we do it every other Thursday. And the last one that I had was God had given me 2 dreams or one encounter, one dream. And the one that had the current one just really kind of rocked me a little bit. I was kind of in that state of, I was awake, but it wasn't awake.
Wow.
And our back door to our porch slammed shut and it shook our bedroom wall. And I'm going, okay, Janice is up putting the dogs outside to, use the bathroom, bring them back in. And I thought, and then so I reached over to make sure she was out, and she wasn't, she was there. So I'm kind of getting nervous, going, someone's been in the house. So I get my gun.
Right.
And I start going through the house, making sure that but the dogs weren't barking, and the doors all were dead bolted. So no one could get in, no one could get out.
Right.
So it was so God was really speaking to me. And I just kind of pondered, okay, God, I've had these kind of things before. And then I started realizing, started writing it down, that this was an Isaiah 22, the key of David moment where God shut the door and locked it to where the enemy was pushed out, and he was moving out basically oppression from the people. Because oppression has been so heavy on everybody for the past 2.5 years,
right,
that we've got to get rid of it. And we have to recalibrate in our eyesight and who we are to move forward. And then the other part is that, no man can open that, only God could. And then no man can open what's been locked. So God was just showing, and that was part of our strategy in our prayer. And we have a whiteboard. And so most of these people, there's some ones that are coming up, and then there's others that are very prophetic that we've known for 30 years. And they're prophets, and so they'll have something. We'll see. I'll bring in a verse, or that scripture, and tell that what happened, and then it just expands, and we talk and bounce it off each other and write the strategies on the board, and then we just start praying, and God starts unfolding what His prayer strategy is for the region, and for just everything, and everything that we prayed about. Pastor Teal talked about. Ron Teal, was just speaking my language on that Saturday morning.
I knew you guys like each other, man.
I'm telling you, he confirmed a lot of things that I had felt God say to us, and personally, what I felt like God was doing was that He was strategizing and getting us prepared for a massive move of His Spirit. And that we would be able to, that we would have an effect here, plus in the region, in the state. And that's how I've always felt how the Panhandle was, is basically we're the head of the state. We may be the square part, but we're the top, we're considered the head of the state. So as we decree, it goes through the state. And when he talked about that move, that prophet coming up to him in Tennessee and asked him about being in West Texas, man, he confirming everything that we had already prayed about that week, that Thursday night that we had already prayed. And it's just, quorum is, I believe, a new type of intercession, prophet, watchman type prayer movement coming.
Man.
It's just, we have to listen and hear what God says. And then we pull that into the heaven, or we pull it down from the heavenlies and decree it into the earth realm. Because we're not going to win that war on the earth realm. We have to be in the heavenlies and decreeing and declaring what He's telling us to do. And so the quorum to me is a ecclesia, so to speak. I think we don't need to be myopic about, the ecclesia only being the church. I think it's the ecclesia is, the ek means called out ones.
Right.
I feel like that what we do is that we have to find the ability to come together in unity, in one voice, and then we have the authority to speak those declarations. It's very difficult, and that being in church for 40 years and our years in ministry as well, right. It's almost impossible to get a congregation in unity, and no matter what size it is. So that's why I like us, of prayer warriors, because that's, really what we're doing now is legislating the heavenlies and bringing it down here to earth and releasing it into the earth realm and shifting our atmosphere for the next reformation. I just don't, revivals die. I want reformation. I want things permanently changed as we march forward into these coming days. And I believe, that we're going to see some incredible things, just like, I mean, God's speaking loud and clear. That hurricane, Ian, I believe, and when you look up its name, it means God is gracious.
Wow.
So we need to know that God has a spirit of graciousness on us right now, because we have been praying and we have been on our knees and asking God to do these works in our lives and in our country, and that he's not finished with our country. So I think it's going to be a powerful thing. You know, I've been praying over Florida. I've got kids in Georgia, and it's coming kind of right up there by them. So
Oh, wow.
we have vested interest in that area, in our granddaughters there. So that's,
Of course.
So, but that, I mean, I believe we're shifting into such a new prayer movement. And then when Larry Lee, I loved it, he imparted into the region that prayer anointing that he started. He was the 80s prayer movement, which carried into, the intercession movement, which carried into Dutch Sheets and Chuck Pierce and those guys pushing it into the Watchmen. So, I mean, we've just seen a progression of how it's transformed. But Larry taught the world, or the Christian world, how to pray and what it meant to. And it's a great foundation. Now, it's like I can see everything of that outline how we used to pray and how God's transformed it into, different versions, like Larry was saying, you got to know who you are. Well, that's our beloved identity. We have to know that God is absolutely in us and is our righteousness. So it's a powerful thing to know who you are, because the enemy cannot beat you down.
As you were talking, Mike, I was reminded of Jesus' prayer in John 15, the unity, and he said multiple times, but that we would be one as he and the Father are one. You have a better chance of that kind of unity with a prayer group and intercessors than you do with, I hate to say it, but kind of a consumerized, watered down scenario where you want to keep everybody happy to keep them coming back.
Yeah. This is for snowflakes.
And it just came out of my mouth the other day that what if the called out ones are not just called out from the world, but they're called out from the Mick Church. They're called out from this thing that is extra to the bride. The bride is in it, but if you noticed, when the churches had nothing to say during COVID, but compliance for the most part, and not all of them, some of the smaller ones kept right on, and some of the bigger ones kept right on. But it was the intercessors. They didn't give up. They didn't stop.
No.
The Mike Sluders, the General Taylors, the Larry Lees, the Ron Tills, the Todd Pitts, Brand Frickers, we don't stop. And a lot of us have seen the scenario for what it really was. And that's a whole nother set of shows there. But I'm starting to believe that it is possible to have unity, not in a industrialized. It's been said before that Christianity started in Galilee as fellowship, Greece as philosophy, Rome as institution, and America as enterprise. Mm-hmm. Well, when we get back to fellowship, I think perhaps the called out ones are called out from everything, but true fellowship and prayer and worship.
And it is a definite, we've had our battle scars, and some of them have been inflicted in ourselves by not understanding what God was saying. And we would to go up to somebody and not understand how to give them a prophetic word, well, you carry this spirit and you carry, instead of understanding the strategy of how to pray for them and push them upward into the kingdom realm for God to reveal that to them.
Wow.
We're not, the ones that come out and decree and declare, death and destruction is not, that's not God's heart a lot of times. Yes, there is judgment, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that we've got to position it that way. We always have to position it with that message, but in a positive way. And because if we don't, we're not leaving the kingdom, in a positive atmosphere. It's negative, because see, God's always been trying to tell us how much he loves us. The Western mentality and our old Western theology, we were lucky if God looked our way and smiled. Now we know how much he loves us and how much he's in us.
Wow.
We catch that. We never caught that he is our righteousness, that I'm in him and he is in me.
Right.
And took it seriously. When you know that, the enemy cannot touch you one little bit. I mean, yeah, he can have his narrative, yapping at you the whole time, but you understand you have God speaking into you, hear how much he loves us and how much he cares for us, because he is a kind, loving God. That is who he is. Now, is there a judgment? Yes, Revelation says that. But those are those that have refused his kindness and his loveness. I mean, that's how, that's what scripture says. But I know this without a doubt, that God is for me and he absolutely loves me. And every morning he waits for me to wake up and he goes, let me kiss you on the mouth. That's how intimate he wants to be with us. And it shows us that affection. Sometimes we just refuse to believe that he is that kind, but I know he is. But we're fixing to see some of his hand move in this country that makes it that you cannot deny his love for us. His kindness overwhelms people.
You're a breath of fresh air, Mike. I don't usually hear prophetic leaders talk the way you do, and usually your prophetic types, they don't have a lot of friends, and they don't have any type of pastoral things about them. They're pretty cut and dry and a little odd. But for you, you really sound like not only a prophetic leader, but you also sound like a prophetic pastor. And that's pretty refreshing. I don't think I've ever encountered anything quite like that. And your emphasis on the love of God is just wonderful, man. And
yeah, I mean, once you realize who you are, then you know that confident, not so much confidence, and it's not an arrogance. It's just that God just points you out and says, this is who you are. And I couldn't say that forever, that because I'd gone through so much as a kid, that why did this tragedy happen to me? Why did this happen to me? Why did, and it just, went on and on and on. And then once, you break through that and you see what God's doing for you, then you see the bigger plan and how the enemy tried to destroy you and destroy your giftings before you ever knew who you were.
wow.
And so my biggest thing was knowing that God, really did care for me, even though whenever he pulled me out of ministry and he pulled me out of the religious structure, that was probably one of the most painful, excruciating pain, spiritually and mentally, I went through. But what it did is it created a whole new atmosphere for me to where I could grow in the supernatural realm that I was boxed in the church.
Right.
And because we really don't have, back, in the early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of that, to where there wasn't a school of the prophets. Only like Christian International with Bishop Hammond, he had a school. There wasn't a lot of it, so to have a school here, which Bill and Kathy have, and it's a great school, it does cost money, but man, I'm telling you, what you invest in yourself, you're going to reap. So that's just kind of a plug. I'm just telling you, invest in yourself and in your propheticness and train that way. It's great. I'm just going to tell you that right now. But I mean, I've always been a dreamer and never knew how to interpret them. And so now I'm understanding. I mean, I'm getting more and more, I have them all the time, but and it's easier to interpret. But there's not a lot of people that teach dream interpretation. And
Right.
that's very big, because people go, well, if you don't know what God's saying, then you should just leave it alone. Well, that's not true. Just like, when we were talking, when we were having lunch, I had that dream where I had those two guys come to me that were part of the bank. And I thought in the dream, I'm just going, oh boy, I'm fixing to get in trouble. But in reality, when I looked up their names and what they meant, one of them meant one who harvests. The other one meant the creativeness of written word. And so the creativeness of the word or music or books was right there, and the one who harvests. So we've got this creativity that's going to flow within the harvest to produce the harvest of the new people that need to come in. And so God's been giving me these dreams. Well, at first I just thought those guys were just, what they came in with the box and set it on my desk. I thought I was going to get fired, because in the dream, that's when you come into the bank and, you leave that day. If they fire you, you're gone. You just pack it up and leave.
Put it in a box.
You put it in the box and you go. But then what God was showing me was that the box was empty. It's time to be filled.
Wow. And you have quite a story, man. You got quite a testimony of success, that the Lord has blessed you with.
Well, I've had my struggles with understanding all that. But now, I mean, there are so many good resources now to pull from, and more people experience with it. I believe, I can't remember if it's 75 or 80% of the time, God spoke in the Old Testament in dreams.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the burning bush, and
I believe that.
That type, but
I believe that.
Communicated through dreams.
Well, I mean, think about it. It's so easy for people to, in this culture, to discount dreams, but they don't understand, that it was in a dream that Joseph, the first Joseph that we know of in Egypt, interpreted, for Pharaoh, and he ended up saving humanity. I stood among the silos in Sychar, Egypt, 100 feet deep, and they were 100 feet high out from the ground level, of what God gave him to do as a result of interpreting that dream. Joseph the Mary, a husband of Mary and stepfather of Jesus, had a dream to go to Egypt, flee to Egypt before the tragedy happened in Bethlehem, and a dream to come back. Of course, Daniel's dream of the empires and the dreams he interpreted, and yet somehow in this culture we don't give the same respect or honor to dreams as a lot of other cultures and maybe even some religions do. But dreams are important. Dreams and visions, and these last days, they will dream, we'll see visions.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I believe God's putting together his praying church.
Wow.
The dreams and visions, because that way, whenever you get them and you see them already start happening, you're going, okay, I did hear God. And then you have to trust that once you engage it more, then he gives you more. And I really do. I believe, just like your background, that strategic, atmosphere right there is what the intercessors and prophets need to be doing right there, is that how we can pray over the nation. In fact, that was one of the things that, with Peter and Doris Wagner and Chuck at Global Harvest, we had a strategic prayer center, and it looked a lot like that, where we could monitor around the world 24/7 what was going on, and it could alert intercessors, around the world what was going on.
Well, that's why I chose this set, because I'm talking to you, and you. That's what you have, man. You've got the intercessor prophetic command center, right there at the quorum. As we wind down, and we have a lot of shows to do, Mike, and you've got a lot of books in you. I think you might have some albums in you too, but But there are people out there in every church, every denomination, they just didn't fit. They had a heart for intercession. They didn't know why. They wanted to pray. They wanted to have a prayer meeting, and the pastor didn't seem to know what to do with them and put them in a broom closet or put them in a back room somewhere, you know. And so they never really fit in. They're that odd group that they're the first one you call when you want to start a prayer chain. But other than that, they've sometimes have been maybe hidden in these churches in obscurity, or just tolerated, maybe, you know, worst case scenario. But I have a feeling a lot of you are watching. You have that intercessor call in your life, or you have that prophetic call in your life. And you may want to try to go out and do that on your own, and you know, God bless you for that. But there are resources, and again, places and people, they can help you along the way and help you develop what's been put inside of you. And it sounds like the quorum is a great place to start. Well, Mike, as we wind down, how would you encourage those intercessors and prophetic types out there? They're in all the churches, all the denominations, but they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
Bill and Kathy have a group that meets every quarter, and it's called Gathering of Eagles, and it's for everybody in the Panhandle. We also put it on the Facebook. We have a Facebook group, and you can join that. And we've got resources. We post things, but it's a way of communicating with us too. But that's a gathering that you can come. It's not owned by any church. It's not owned by any pastors.
Wonderful. Just
a group of prophets and intercessors coming together. It's a safe place to learn. It's a place you're not going to get judged, because we've been through it. We've been there, and we have the battle scars to tell you what not to do and what to do, and so it's a place where you can grow and ask questions, because a lot of people have a lot of weird things happen to them, and that happens in the prophetic realm.
Right.
You see things in different realms, and, there's people to bounce those things off of and just say, hey, don't be afraid of that. Press into that, because I believe we're going to see things that, like Enoch, he walked in some crazy places.
Yeah, he did.
And so we're, one thing that I never had a mentor, and that I've been waiting for this thing for 30 years.
Wow.
For this region. And, you just got to know that Bill and Kathy had a prophetic word 30 years ago to start this thing from a prophet at CI, Christian International.
Wow.
And it literally called this group Gathering of Eagles. And
I can't wait.
I mean, it is refreshing. We do worship. Sometimes we meet at Pray Amarillo. They've been awesome to let us use their facilities. And that's where we have quorum, and that's where we hold that. And then there's sometimes we have a bigger meeting out there at the Sims Barn, just on the west side of Canyon. And so it's really cool to be a part of a community that understands where you've been. Like I said, I've not had a mentor, and I really kind of questioned God and was upset at him because I really wanted that one-on-one and teaching and stuff. And one time he just finally spoke to me and said, I just don't want man's thumbprint on you.
There you go.
You're going to have my thumbprint. So I banged my head against the wall for a long time. And that's where, a lot of people now I can tell them, I said, listen, this is why you've been where you've been. God wants his thumbprint on you. No man's thumbprint.
I love that. And that's a perfect place to stop for this first time of many times, Mike, I hope. Thank you so much for being on Word on the Street. Folks, look at the information that's been on the bottom of your screen the whole time. Make contact. You definitely want to be a part of that Gathering of Eagles and inquire more about the quorum as well. And who knows, you may hear Mr. Mike Sluder sing prophetically too. So anyhow, well, you're stepping into things you haven't stepped in a while, and it's all right on time, Mike. You're right on time. Such a breath of fresh air. Let no man's thumbprint be on you folks, but only the hand of God guiding you, and his mark on in your spirit and in your mind, in your heart, your soul. Until next time, my friend Mike, we'll see you again.